This is TWiT.
Android Studio. This is the IDE, which is the acronym that means Integrated Development Environment. Basically, this is the tool that developers use to make Android apps. And this is the tool that Google initially revealed at the 2013 Google I/O keynote, and then they released it as a beta. Well, the big news this week is that it finally got its official 1.0 release. This doesn't really mean anything immediately for consumers, but it's a really great thing for developers, and consumers will see it once developers start using this tool kind of in earnest. Android Studio has a number of templates and WYSIWYG editing tools for coding Android apps, and it's basically this is the main tool the developers are going to use to make their apps from here on in. And it's got lots of really neat kind of bells and whistles, and we saw some of it at the keynote. But the thing to know about Android Studio, if you're not a developer, I've checked it out and I played with it a little bit. I'm actually going to switch to it permanently now that it's out of beta and it's a 1.0 release. That to me is the signal to let go of Eclipse, which was the old tool, and move on to Android Studio. The thing to know about Android Studio is that it makes things that Google wants developers to do a lot easier. So, for example, when you start a new project at Android Studio, it says, do you want to support Wear? Do you want to support TV? Do you want to support Google Glass? And you just check the boxes, and it gets you set up with all the things that you need in order to support those things. So that's all there really kind of from the get-go. As you're developing your app, you can see your app on multiple different screen sizes on your computer screen at the same time. So as you play with your views, it live updates. You can see, hey, this is what it looks like on a tablet. This is what it looks like on a phone. This is what it looks like on a phablet. This is what it looks like on a watch immediately, which is awesome. Like, as a developer, that's amazing, because right now you kind of have to fire up these really slow simulators. And things like localization, which is translating your app into different languages. You can type, words, new labels or new copy, and watch it live update on the screen and see how the layout is on buttons and things. Long story short, this is going to make Android apps a lot better for consumers, with a lot of support across the different products, TV, Wear, Glass, and regular Android across different screen sizes, a lot better. So as more developers use Android Studio, which they will, because this is the 1.0 release, consumers will see this, and I think they're going to start seeing it, really in 2015. So this is cool. I know this probably sounds like a lot of developer speak. I don't know. Does this make sense, Jason? Hopefully I explained this well enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. So my main question was and you kind of answered that, but are consumers going to see a big difference in the apps that are created here? And B, what does this mean for the other tools, Eclipse? Like, is Eclipse eventually just going to go away, be unsupported going forward, or is that also an option for people to use if they prefer that, or would they prefer that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I get the pretty strong impression that Eclipse is approaching its kind of end of life. Yeah. I mean, it seems like Google is going to support it for now, but it really does feel like Android Studio is kind of the future. And Android Studio is based on IntelliJ, which is another product, Java IDE. But it seems like Android Studio is the future. So I think that most Android developers are going to switch over to Android Studio. And it wouldn't surprise me if they end of life Eclipse in the next couple of years. I think right now you have the choice of tools, but Android Studio is pretty clearly superior. And I think that's where Google's going to invest their resources.
Does Android Studio make it easier for any person that's interested in getting into developing for Android? I mean, I know that I remember what we saw at Google I/O both last year and then this year made it seem like, whoa, you can preview everything, on all these different devices, and it took a more visual approach. But obviously, there's a lot of code that you have to know for that as well. Is this lowering the barrier of entry for people who are just getting started with development?
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw from the little bit that I played around with it, it's got a couple of wizards that you just kind of click through and say, yeah, add this view, add that view, and lets you get started with a Hello World app, which is basically where all coders get started. And on the Android documentation site, there's plenty of tutorials to kind of create a new app. I mean, I would say I think people do have to have a little bit of programming experience to really. I don't think you can come in as a total noob and download Android Studio and build an app. But if you're patient, you're willing to work through the tutorials, you could just literally go step by step and do a Hello World app with a button that does something. And yeah, I do think Android Studio makes that easier, particularly across different device screen sizes. So I would encourage anyone with even just a little bit of coding experience and just a lot of interest and patience, just walk through the tutorials and definitely try out Android Studio.